Again, good afternoon. I'm Hilda Garibay, the project leader of the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines. So just a review, this project is being implemented by UNIDO, being funded by the JEF, and then the main government partner is the DNR. And now we are going to have partnership with TESDA and then other organizations. So this is the three components of the project. The component one is the policy and regulatory assessment. Component two is the awareness and capacity building, and component three is the technology transfer. So for the update, for the component one, that's why we are here today, is that for the component policy and regulatory assessment, the poly research on flammable refrigerants and existing national standard for energy efficiency in the food cold chain sector is done. So stakeholders consultation and validation on the policy research already been done to the concerned government agencies such as the DNR, the DOE, the BPS, the Interagency Technical Working Group, and now we are presenting it to you. So after this policy forum, we're going to have going to drop the policy instrument guidelines for energy efficiency and flammable refrigerants for industrial and commercial food cold chain. So for the component two, the awareness and capacity building, I'm sure you're being aware that we have been conducting seminars, webinars, and technical trainings. We have also learning materials update in our website and our YouTube channel. We have also participated in international events for 2 consecutive years now. So we've been active in the industry. And then for the component three, the technology transfer. So the online platform, the CCI-Hub, as the ecosystem of technical resources, technology promotion, knowledge sharing, stakeholder collaboration is operational. And then the physical hub to be established this year at TESDA. And then we have already established partnership with government agencies, expert, technology suppliers, and end users. So cooperation with financial institution is to be established this year. And then for the technology showcase, 9 technology suppliers committed to contribute at the CCI Hub. So more are expected. So you will know it next week on September 21 for our webinar regarding this. So, and then lastly, we're going to announce that we're about to launch our business case demonstration project. So please stay tuned in our website to have more information regarding this. We will going to demonstrate innovative system and improvement, as well as other project adopting low carbon refrigeration technologies. The selection of demo case will follow principle of replicability, impact, safety, and readiness. So again, please stay tuned in our website and in other channel, in our social media channels for announcement regarding this demo case. So now we'll go now to the forum proper. So refrigeration makes modern life convenient, but hundreds of millions of people in nations with the hottest climate do not have access to this service, and the effects could be profound. Access to refrigeration plays a significant role in inclusive economic development by means of a cold chain that links agricultural products of smallholder farmers in rural areas to a wider market, resulting to increase their income and raise their quality of life. Cold chain ensure the distribution of vaccine. It also prevents spoilage and food losses, and ensure the availability of buffer stock in times of crisis and disaster. It is worth to note, though, that cold chain system and technologies are also substantial and growing contributor to climate change due to HFC use and high energy consumption. Thus, it is important to ensure that the direction of the cold chain towards energy efficient, climate-friendly refrigeration. In this way, the government can deliver more economic, environmental, and health benefits through reduced food loss and waste. This forum, as I've already said a while ago, explore prospect of building sustainable and climate-friendly cold chain by understanding the current policy environment and identify barriers and opportunities for new technologies through safety standards and natural refrigerants and energy-efficient technologies and practices. It also seeks to explore synergies among mandates of various government agencies related to food cold chain in promoting food safety, gender equity, and environmental management. So thus, this forum seeks to answer the following questions. So this afternoon, we're going to explore this following, we'll try to answer this following questions. Number one is, What institutional measures should be in place to ensure that National Cold Chain Committee will be able to fulfill its mandate? How can the roadmap and the NCCC be strengthened? And then number two, what are the incentives and benefits for cold chain enterprises that will pursue energy efficiency? Number three, what role does standards development play in ensuring food safety? Number four, what action can be pursued by the industry to ensure proper management and disposal of refrigerants? And lastly, how can standards development address the need for climate-friendly cold chain? What are the opportunities and barriers? Today, we have very good lineup of panelists. We will join by number one, Attorney Marjorie Ramos Samaniego, the Governor of the Board of Investments, DTI. Mr. Anthony Dizon, who's always been supportive to the project, the President and Cold Chain Association, the President of the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines. Director Patrick Aquino, from the Energy Utilization and Management Bureau of the DOE. Dr. Neonette Agreda, OIC Chief of Accreditation and Registration Division, and Dr. April Chavez, Senior Meat Control Officer of the National Meat Inspection Services. And then Engineer Romel Navaluna, Chief Chemical Management Section, Environmental Management Bureau. And then Mr. Abelino Molina Jr., the Senior Trade and Industry Development Specialist from the Philippine Bureau of Standard. So each speaker will have 10-minute discussion and will be requested to stay for a question and answer later on the program. But first, we'll hear from Ms. May Valdez, our National Coordinator for Policy and Legislation of our project, the summary of the policy research undertaken for the project. So, May, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm May Valdez from the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines. My presentation for today will focus on the summary of the draft policy research paper on cold chain safety standards for refrigerant and energy efficiency. As mentioned, this presentation is about the research that we have undertaken in the project, the objective of which is to understand the existing policy environment to identify barriers and opportunities for promoting sustainable and climate-friendly cold chains in the Philippines. So this slide provides an overview of my presentation. I will just make it quick because I think the insights of our panelists will be more important than what I had to say in this presentation. But just to give you an overview, I will discuss the benefits and impacts of cold chains, how cold chains can contribute to the SDGs, and the analysis on safety standards for refrigerants and energy efficiency. We would also present opportunities to maximize SDG impacts of the National Cold Chain Industry Roadmap. According to Mercier et al., cold chain refers to the food supply logistics chain that uses refrigeration technology to continuously maintain a suitable temperature and humidity environment for perishable products, such as fruits, vegetables, dairy, meats, and fish. This picture of Mamang Sorbetero, as we are all familiar with, has always been a symbol of Filipino ingenuity. But it also depicts the conditions we face in terms of cold chain logistics here in the Philippines, which is often referred to as crude. So if you're one of Mamang Sorbetero's avid customers, you see that the box where he puts the ice cream have ice in it. So it quite depicts how our cold chain infrastructure is here in the Philippines. When we talk about cold chains, it does not only pertain to a truck or a refrigerator. It is a system starting at post-harvest up until display at retail stores. It includes pre-cooling, refrigerated transport, cold storage, food retail, and food services. So this sector is quite extensive and broad. It plays a significant role in inclusive economic development because it links agricultural products of smallholder farmers from rural areas to a wider market and increase their incomes and raise their quality of life. Cold chain also prevents spoilage and food losses. According to the FAO, 90% of food loss and waste in Asia occur in processing and distribution phase. So much food is wasted at a time when there is widespread hunger and malnutrition. Cold chains can address this while also ensuring the availability of buffer stocks in times of crisis or disasters. It's worth to note, though, that cold chain systems and technologies are also a substantial growing contributor to climate change due to HFC use and high energy consumption. Cooling sectors by 2050. So I'm not pertaining to the cold chain sector per se, but all cooling sectors. This could set back the goal of the Paris Agreement, which seeks to limit warming to 1.5 degrees by mid-century. The Kigali Amendment linked the HFC phase-out with climate action. It is expected to limit warming from HFCs from a baseline of 0.3 to 0.5 degrees centigrade to 0.6 by 2100. Should this mean that we forgo using cold chains? Of course not. We should definitely develop our cold chain infrastructure, but we should ensure to do so without adding to global warming. We should do so to avoid further emissions from food waste as well. So if you're familiar with, of course, food waste also releases methane in the atmosphere, so it actually adds up to global warming. Approximately 1 gigatons of carbon dioxide in year 2011, this is based from a study, is attributable to insufficient cold chains. So the more food loss we have, the more carbon dioxide or methane, it's in GHG, we also have in the atmosphere. The potential impact of improved cold chains could account for 19 to 21 gigatons of carbon dioxide of avoided emissions cumulatively until 2050. Improving access to energy-efficient and climate-friendly refrigeration through enhanced cold chains would deliver more economic, environmental, and health benefits through reduced food loss and waste. It helps us achieve sustainable development goals on food security through reduced food loss and availability of fresh and nutritious food and produce, especially for people in urban centers. It also contributes to addressing social inequality by linking the rural food producers to a wider market and increasing their income and quality of life. It also helps us achieve our goals on health, especially with the vaccination rollout, to end this pandemic. We can add more results to this if we consider goals on gender equality, responsible consumption and production, and climate action. It will all depend on how we create an enabling environment for the cold chain industry. So to give a snapshot of the industry, this is actually based from the presentation of Mr. Anthony Dizon of CCI-Hub. So we have a capacity of 500,000 pallet positions, 320 of which are located in Luzon, and more than half of that capacity is used to store meat and poultry. And an additional of 50,000 pallet spaces are expected to be established this year because of the increase of the industry due to the demand of consumers for food, because during the pandemic, we all returned to what's only essential, and these are the basic necessities of food. And it will continue, and that growth is also due to the fact that we're importing more meat because of the ASF we experienced in the recent years. A study conducted by the Philippine Institute of Development Study analyzed the problems encountered by the tuna industry. So why am I sharing this? This study actually encapsulates each component of the cold chain. So it gives us a good sense of what are the bottlenecks that the industry encounter. So in terms of the regulatory aspect, so to summarize that study, it it says that the challenges mainly lie on the type and structure of the domestic regulations and how those regulations are enforced. Enforcement of regulations is relatively inefficient because of the following reasons. So one is the inadequate staffing on the side of the regulator. Two, lack of proper and effective communication and consultation mechanism between regulators and regulated entities. And three, the inadequate understanding and appreciation of regulatory intent and inconsistent application of regulation. So this is being said because the policy research is actually focused on identifying the barriers of climate-friendly cold chains. So this could be considered to address those barriers. We also need to address these problems identified in the study made by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Given the challenges, there are also opportunities that yield incentives and benefits for the sector. So one of that is the RA 11285. It's a new law, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. There are two points about this new law. So first, it institutionalizes energy efficiency for establishments, especially those that are energy intensive. Second is that it provides for incentives for such sector so that it could transition to more energy efficient technologies and systems. The said law categorize establishments into two. There are the type 1 designated establishments. These are those that consumes 500 kilowatt hours to 4 million kilowatt hours of energy per year. And the type 2 designated establishments, those that have more than 4 million kilowatt hour of energy consumption per year. So this, in this slide, it's linked to how cold chain establishment were categorized in another study. Just to give an idea that these type 1 and type 2 designated establishments are that the cold chain sector is covered by these two DEs. No? So for example, medium-sized stores that have an average energy consumption of 329 to 1.6 million kilowatt hour of energy per year falls under the type 1 category, and the large size stores falls under the type 2 because the energy consumption of these stores goes beyond, some goes beyond 4 million. It's also interesting to note that RA 11285, or the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, provides for the compliance with guidelines on energy conserving design on buildings. So this include cold chain establishments and facilities. And it also provided for the creation of energy performance labeling standards and other incentives for energy efficiency projects. And Rule 11, Section 55 of its implementing rules and regulation provided for the development of minimum energy performance standards, or MEPS, for commercial, industrial, and transport sectors, which will be pursued in partnership with the National Economic Development Authority. So this also covers cold chain, and being one of the more energy intensive sectors, I think this is among the priority also. In terms of promoting climate-friendly refrigerants, transition refrigerants with low or zero global warming potential, such as ammonia, CO2, and hydrocarbons. However, these natural refrigerants are deemed toxic and flammable sometimes if not used properly and not using the appropriate system. It's important to have safety standards in place. So there are basically two main standards, types of standards: the general standards and the product standards. Every law, every country with national laws may mandate compliance to safety standards, while other countries, they may be entirely voluntary. So in our case, the national standards body is the Bureau of Philippine Standards of the DTI. So it's a privilege to have them here in the forum, and later on we can also ask them questions if we have. So other countries may set standards to be voluntary, and with regards of the BPS, they set the standards, they create the standards based on international standards, but the compliance to these standards would be the mandate of regulatory agencies. There's also a thing such as rules of precedence when it comes to standards. So it means that if a product standard is available, it should be prioritized than the more general standards. So this is just a list of standards on refrigerants that have been adopted by the Philippines through the Bureau of Philippine Standards. Our national standards are called Philippine National Standards, so that's why it's PNS. So we have PNS ISO 817 on refrigerants, PNS ISO 5149, it's a series from 1 to 4. And we also have PNS IEC 60335-2-89, the version that was adopted in 2019, but it's a 2015 version. So another thing with standards is that they get updated regularly. So BPS is always on the lookout for these kinds of updates so that we have the most recent standards in place. As a guide for the development of the cold chain industry, DTI, actually BOI, I think, no, has come up with a cold chain industry roadmap. In terms of climate-friendly and sustainable technologies, it includes action and agenda on renewable energy. So later on, we also have the privilege of having a BOI governor to speak more about this later. So not to preempt that, just to mention that renewable energy is already an agenda of the industry. So the National Cold Chain Committee, so in that National Cold Chain Industry Roadmap, one of the key provisions was to have a National Cold Chain Committee. And this is composed of the following. The chairperson would be the BOI, but I think it's already co-chairs between BOI and DA. So later on, we will have a more update on the composition of the National Cold Chain Committee. And it's also, the vice chair is the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines, the president of the Cold Chain, who fortunately, we also have here today later to talk more about the Cold Chain Industry Committee. And the roles and responsibilities include the ensuring the implementation of the cold chain industry roadmap, update the roadmap targets, conduct advocacy work, assign point person for every key activity, monitor progress of various activities, and assist in the formation of the TWG. As the cold chain sector is a broad and extensive sector, we would see later on that there are several agencies involved in the National Cold Chain Committee. In terms of international benchmarks, we identified 3. We tried to identify benchmarks that these are policies and these are policy instruments from other countries that we deem benefit the cold chain industry in their transition to more sustainable and climate-friendly it reviews the substitutes. So this is from the US. This reviews substitutes within a comparative risk framework in 8 industrial sectors, including refrigeration. The SNAP program does not provide a static list of alternatives, but instead evolves the list as the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, makes decisions that are informed by its overall understanding of the environment and human health impacts, as well as its current knowledge about available substitutes. So in this program, the burden of proving the safety of the technology or the system, in this regard, a refrigeration system, for example, using natural refrigerants, would be put on the manufacturer. So it's not having like a restrictive list, but it's a list that evolves over time when more technologies become available. Second is the India Cooling Plan, which includes targets on standardization of design, construction, and associated specifications for small, medium, and large cold chain infrastructure components, linking incentives being provided for cold chain infrastructure that adopts energy efficiency design and low GWP or low global warming potential refrigerants, and the development of safety standards for flammable and toxic refrigerants for cold storage and other segments of the cold chain. So the reason why we selected the India's National Cooling Plan cooling sectors, whether it's household, and in our case, the cold chain. So they have specific targets on this. And lastly, Australia's AS/NZS 60335.2.89 of 2020. It's an identical adoption of IEC 60335-2-89 edition 3.0. It raises, the reason why we selected this because the most recent version of the IEC 60335-2-89, which was published, I think, in 2019, raises the charge limit for flammable refrigerants in self-contained case. To 100 grams. The IEC standard also increases the charge limit for A2 and A2L refrigerants to 1,200 grams from 150. So this, the point of these policies that it favors for the use of more climate-friendly refrigerants. So in our case, in the Philippines, so these are our analysis and findings for the scoping policy research that we've done. So the country has adopted ISO 817 and ISO 5149 series in 2017 with minor modifications. It was developed by the PPS TC on cooking, heating, and household appliances. And during the course of its development, some provisions for EN 378 on addressing safety and environmental issues in using natural refrigerants was included in the discussion, but it was not included in the final document due to prior publication of the IEC 60079 standards on explosive atmosphere. So in coming up or in adopting standards, BPS also checked if it's contradictory to other standards that was already published. So in this case, some provisions that may have been favorable for use of natural refrigerants were not included because it has some conflict in previous standards. But we're talking about 2017 here and the updates in 2019, and it's really something that's been ongoing because the international standards bodies are really being compelled to update their standards to adopt this so that nations can comply with the requirements of the Montreal Protocol, Kigali Amendment, the Paris Agreement, and these standards are crucial for the transition of the industries to more climate-friendly and more sustainable technologies. And IEC 60079 have also been updated. So there's it's actually a series of standards. So they get updated separately, but almost all of the components of that series has an update. And the most recent one is 2000, just this year. And IEC 60335-2-89 version 3 was also published in 2019. So which can be explored for updating our PNS because it's based on the 2015 version. So these are the equipment covered by IEC 60335-2-89. As I've mentioned earlier, when we say cold chain, does not only refer to a ref or a reefer truck or a cold storage. It's actually a very extensive industry. For the large cold chain facilities, we have, for example, the cold storages. They're already using ammonia, which is natural refrigerant. In fact, most of, if I'm not mistaken, I think almost 90% of the huge cold storages existing in the Philippines uses ammonia as a technology. So what they can benefit from is the energy efficiency part. If we're going to create more enabling policy environment that provides incentives for their for having energy efficient technologies for the cold storages, then that would also be good. But for the smaller components of the cold chain, which are the refrigerators being used as display cabinets in retail stores, for example, or in supermarkets, IEC 60335-9 would certainly be a game changer because it would allow for use of natural refrigerants, for example, propane, in this type of equipments. So in terms of energy efficiency, there is already an existing policy framework. So that's really a very good news, the RA 11285. And Rule 11, Section 55 of the IRR says that it will develop maps for commercial, industrial, and transport sectors. So the next step to that is for NEDA to come up with a cost-benefit analysis, which will inform the maps what numbers should be indicated there. And also another good news is that the proposed national cold chain industry roadmap included energy efficiency targets. I mean, renewable energy targets, I'm sorry. So the cold chain industry roadmap can also include environmental management aspect. So if we're talking about the entire cold chain, for example, it should also consider the disposal and recycling of refrigerants, for example, exploring subsidies for low GWP and energy efficient technologies, or maybe linking them both, like what India did in their national cooling plan, and as well as exploring synergies with National Climate Change Action Plan, nationally determined contribution targets, and national cooling plan. We do not have a national cooling plan yet. I think it's already in the works, but there's no specific plan yet. And although we have submitted our nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement last May, it still lacks details. So that's what the country should work on. Okay, but aside from this, I just have some additional notes now. Aside from this, we can also maximize cold chains to achieve green economic recovery. The industry's leapfrogging into climate-friendly technology, including use of natural refrigerants and energy efficiency, presents economic benefits in the long term. As the industry is expected to grow, it could employ green technologies and create green jobs. So, green jobs include skilled workers such as technicians and maintenance staff. This is also the reason why TESDA is one of the key partners of the project, so that they can train and certify workers. These are jobs that could be available for those who have been displaced by the pandemic, and it could be for women and girls too. So in terms of the gender equality, gender equity aspect, these opportunities, although more common to men, like engineers, refrigeration maintenance staff, could also be open to girls and to women. Cold chains will also increase the income of farmers, our major food producers, which could improve the agriculture sector's contribution to our gross domestic product. That's all for my presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions later on, but I think our other panelists have very more important things to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, May, for that presentation. Indeed, there are many new and exciting prospects for climate-friendly cold chain when it comes to policy. From the enactment of RA 11285 to the cold chain industry roadmap and the newly established National Cold Chain Committee. We want to learn more about this, and we are privileged today that we have the co-chair members of the National Cold Chain Committee. Reminders, to share with you, we have already 3 questions. So the speakers may type in their question directly. We will go through all the Q&A later after all the speakers done with their piece. So Engineer Cesar Lee will address your question later po. So to start the discussion, let us please welcome our first panelist. She is a governor of the Board of Investment. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney Ramos Samaniego. Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. The screen is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Hilda, Engineer Hilda. Good afternoon, everyone. To my co-panelists in the forum, and to the implementers, policymakers, key stakeholders, and industry players here today. Good afternoon. Engineer Hilda, could you share my screen? Yeah, there. Thank you. Thank you, May. Okay, so I'm going to speak about strengthening the cold chain industry roadmap and the National Cold Chain Committee. Next slide. So as you would know, let me just talk about the Philippine cold chain industry. We note that the development of the cold chain industry is a crucial link to address food safety and food security concerns. This will support deeper linkage of local agricultural production, especially with agro-processing and food manufacturing, and it will facilitate expanded trading, whether domestic or for export. This will also build the capacity of traditionally food insecure or those underserved areas to build on their food stocks, especially during this time, at the time of the pandemic, and of course, as we all know, during times of disasters like typhoons. More importantly, as we have seen today, the cold chain industry is very critical in the proper handling of vaccines to ensure its potency and efficacy. Next slide, please. Okay, earlier, May talk briefly about the Philippine Cold Chain Industry Roadmap. Our roadmap, the Philippine Cold Chain Industry Roadmap was publicly launched on December 14, 2020. We launched it in mixed platforms, physical at the BOI and virtual via Zoom attended by more than 200 participants. What's our vision? The roadmap vision is that to be an avowed champion for food safety, a recognized benefactor to agribusiness development, and a valued link in the supply chain sector. Its mission would be for a cohesive, functional, and collaborative network of cold chain stakeholders imbued with the highest operating principles and standards, compliant with government policies and regulations, and responsive to the needs of the Filipinos. Next slide. Okay, what is I'm just calling the important points under the roadmap. So here we have the Go5 synergy. The roadmap pathways will employ a coordinated sectoral, private and government and program-oriented approach to provide appropriate interventions across all sectors. It shall follow the Go5 synergy of 5 goals. So there will be 5 goals, 5 objectives, 5 focus industries, and 5 action agenda, which the industry will undertake in the next 5 years. So 555 po yan. What we call the 555. What are these? The 5 objectives. First is it's to provide a situational assessment of the Philippine cold chain industry. Present, describe, and analyze the status and prospects for the Philippine cold chain industry. Identify supply, value chain gaps, and required interventions. Set goals and strategies as well as plan targets to be competitive and enable the industry to contribute to the national goal of inclusive growth. And finally, recommend strategic directions and action programs in short to medium term to enhance the industry. Essentially, the situationer and all of those are already in the roadmap. What are its goals? An organized cold chain industry with synergistic partnership among all stakeholders working in unison for the good of all. A strong logistics provider sector, so it includes transports, ports, and road networks to implement continuous cold chain protocol in transit and handling. Availability of more efficient, skilled, and fairly compensated labor force. Experienced refrigeration technicians and engineers, skilled manpower on heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, drivers, and NMIS inspector, among others. It also seek to have favorable government and public support that would encourage increase in investments in the cold chain industry towards countryside development that will generate jobs and help alleviate poverty and improve the lives of the Filipinos. And of course, one of its goals would be to increase awareness on food safety. These are the 5 focus industries: meat or the meat/processed meat, fisheries and aquaculture, 3rd, dairy, 4th, fruits and vegetables, and 5th, non-food. So we're talking here of the pharmaceutical, vaccines, and the electronics, among others. What are its 5 action agenda? Investment in cold chain facilities or cold storage warehouses, investment in cold chain logistics services, roads, connectivity, tracking services, then demand enhancement or increased demand for cold chain services. And then 4th is food safety education. And 5th is policies and regulations. So how are we going to implement this? Next slide, please. So we have the implementation of the cold chain industry roadmap. We have institutionalized it through the creation of what we call the National Cold Chain Committee. The National Cold Chain Committee, or what we say as the NCQ, it's a multi-agency and multi-sectoral body that will oversee and steer the implementation of the plans and programs of the Philippine Cold Chain Industry Roadmap. The heads or the chairpersons and the co-chairpersons of the TWG are members of the NCQ. So we have as co-chairs both the BOI and the DA, as both agencies play an integral role in the cold chain industry roadmap. The vice chair is the CCI-Hub, which is our partner in the development of the cold chain. Then we have here, for purposes of the programs, we have here the TWG on cold chain services. The chair is a Cold Chain Association of the Philippines, or the CCI-Hub, and co-chaired by the BOI. We also have the TWG on cold chain logistics, chaired by BOI and co-chaired by CCI-Hub. Then we have the TWG on food and drug safety education, which is we're still looking for the sector for who will chair it, but essentially we're looking now at the DA, and it will be co-chaired by CCI-Hub. Then we have the TWG on policy reforms and data information communication, which is chaired by the BOI and co-chaired by the CCI-Hub. As we are talking right now, a national workshop is also ongoing from yesterday, September 20 until the 23rd, for coming up with all the actions, programs of all of these TWGs. And the purpose, of course, of the planning workshop is to have to approve the work plan that is drafted. So all of these TWGs are meeting during this week to identify the priority areas or the priority programs or projects, and how, of course, in that workshop, we're also soliciting the comments, the inputs of all TWG members, following that the draft TOR that we have already agreed. Once everything's finalized, we're going to have a resolution amongst the NC Cube to ensure it's to have a continuity of the plan, and of course the commitment to really achieve the projects and programs that are proposed in the workshop. Our secretariat is our BOI, which is under the resource-based services, and each TWG have their own terms of reference. The terms of reference will also will now be formalized once after this workshop. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so just looking at the agenda of UNIDO, we're also looking at the food safety. As you would note, one of the action agenda under the Go5 synergy is food safety education. So here, as we are talking now, these are also being presented or will be presented to the planning workshop. And these are the proposed actions or plans and programs on food safety. First is the conduct of webinar on safe handling of frozen products, or webinar on safety of frozen products. This will be proposed in collaboration with the Office of the CABSEC, with the CABSEC Nograles as the chairperson of the IATC on Zero Hunger, through its kasapatan at ugnayan ng mamamayan sa akpang pagkain ng nutrisyon, or Kumain webinar series. The program of the webinar may include the following topic: the EO 133, or increase of MAV of pork by 200,000 metric ton, and 134 temporary reduction MFN rates on pork. And then DA's policy on food safety. NMIS is here. CCI-Hub's interventions on handling frozen products, update on pork retail prices, fresh and frozen, and updates on the initiative of Presyong Reasonable Dapat, or the PRD program. And of course, we also have the DTI, which is the frozen meat edition of the DTI, the Department of Agriculture, and the Robinson Supermarket. Then we're also looking at creation of info materials on food safety and consumption of frozen food products. So we intend to come up with a manual on food safety, which may include guidance on the characteristics of fresh meat and government regulations on food safety, standee, pamphlets, social cards for prominent display in wet markets, supermarkets, and groceries. Also the pop-up message for online delivery platforms, and of course, food food safety awareness campaign, which we're going to use our BOI Infocoms. Just to announce as well that the TWG on cold chain services met yesterday, 20 September 2021, and the TWG on cold chain logistics are meeting now, Tuesday. The TWG on policy reforms and data and information will be meeting tomorrow, 22 September 2021. And the TWG on food and drug safety education will be meeting on September 23, 2021. So these proposed measures will first be presented as stated to the cold chain services and cold chain logistics. And once approved, the webinar will be referred to the TWG on food and drug safety education and the info materials on the TWG on policy reforms and data and information and communication. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, of course, we're also exploring some collaborations. We are looking at international technical cooperation, or there's still that submission of concept notes, and we're also looking at grants. And one of the identified cold chain gap barrier is the African swine fever. During the planning workshop, there was this draft concept note on technical assistance strengthening cold chain facilities in Africa in swine fever-free provinces in the Philippines to increase their capacity to supply pork in NCR and Luzon. They're proposed for submission to the USTDA, and it can be presented as a possible action plan or program. So, of course, we already have drafted some concept note, and we are now looking at it. For the expected outcomes for this project, we're looking at insufficient pork and high retail prices in NCR and Luzon to be addressed, linkage of Visayas Mindanao pork producers to retailers and processors to be deepened, business models to be enhanced, database to be established, and meat handling practices to be improved, and the spread of ACF to be controlled. So we are collaborating as we are speaking right now, and that would be all from my end. Thank you very much. I'm now ready if you may have some questions.
Thank you, Attorney Ramos Samaniego, for that presentation, ma'am. The questions will be addressed later after all the speakers have done their piece. But for those who want to ask questions, you can directly type it in the Q&A box, and Attorney Samaniego can type in her answer, or she could answer it live later after all the speakers have been done. Thank you again, ma'am. The NCC is composed of government and industry partners. It is key to achieving goals of the cold chain industry roadmap. As a Vice Chair of the NCCC, we will now hear from Mr. Anthony Dizon, the President of the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines. Our question to Mr. Dizon is, what institutional measures should be in place to ensure that the National Cold Chain Committee will be able to fulfill its mandate, and how can the roadmap and the NCC be strengthened? Mr. Dizon?
Hilda. Before I start my presentation, I just want to reiterate what I mentioned at today's workshop of the technical working groups of the National Cold Chain Committee. I would like to reiterate our appreciation to the Board of Investments, and particularly to Governor March Ramos Samaniego, for their initiative in conceptualizing and shepherding the actualization of the cold chain industry roadmap. As Hilda mentioned, I have been tasked to address the question of what institutional measures should be in place to ensure that the National Cold Chain Committee will be able to fulfill its mandate. As an opening statement, we would like to say that similar to any other distribution system, the efficiency and effectiveness of the cold chain will be influenced by developments at the demand and supply ends. The ability of the National Cold Chain Committee to achieve its objectives rests on the joint efforts of government and the private sector to assemble the links needed to create a sustainable and economically justifiable supply chain for food and ostensibly pharmaceuticals. The cold chain industry roadmap has identified 5 key result areas essential to short to medium-term industry development, and we will expound on them individually as follows. The 5 key result areas of the cold chain industry roadmap are as follows: investments in cold chain facilities, investments in cold chain logistics services, demand enhancement, food safety education, and policies and regulations. Let us tackle the first area, investments in cold chain facilities. One of the most important action steps that need to be undertaken is really the identification of areas that could benefit from cold chain development for purposes of either distribution of products in the area of coverage or encouraging backward integration of production or processing capabilities. This is something that has already been undertaken in an activity that was partnered in by the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines, where in a USAID-sponsored project, where we have identified 9 specific locations around the country that could be ideal for cold chain development. And we have that information in file. If that information is useful for the participants in today's webinar, we will be glad to share them with you. Next, we need to develop an attractive investment climate conducive to foreign investments for purposes of technology transfer and opening of new markets. I just need to emphasize at this point that even prior to the crafting of the cold chain industry roadmap, the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines has received several expressions of interest for foreign companies to create a presence for themselves in the Philippine cold chain industry. But so far, none of those overtures have borne fruit. And we hope that if the investment climate develops to a situation that is attractive for foreign investors, we should be able to realize this aspiration. Third, we also need the support of national government agencies in addressing investment constraints. One of these is land use versus land acquisition. So for those who are familiar with the cold chain industry, we realize that, or we recognize that one of the significant investment components of cold chain infrastructure is real estate. And therefore, it militates for the case that if we were able to utilize land that is already available versus land that has yet to be acquired, it would improve the investment profile and perhaps create a motivation for new investments in cold chain infrastructure. The good news here is that we have information from the Board of Investments that perhaps there is already a move to relax the rules on the utilization of real estate in the special economic zones around the country to allow domestic oriented industries to also utilize the real estate available in these areas. Second, we also need to ensure that there is reliable power supply in the investment areas suitable for cold chain development, because power is a very important ingredient to successful cold chain infrastructure. And third, we also need to be cognizant of the need to support the legislation and the enactment of the law on the ease of doing business. I think this is referred to as Republic Act 11032. We will also need the support of local government units for their respective incentives that they provide to attract investments in their respective jurisdictions. And likewise, we also need for the local government units to practice the tenets of the ease of doing business. Next, we need the support of better road infrastructure network because the Philippines is archipelagic. We need both a combination of road infrastructure and marine transportation facilities that will bring goods from source to consumption sector. Relatedly to this, we also need to enhance the franchising procedures for transport services that will be used to transport commodities from production to consumption. And we will also address the concerns on the cost of doing business because one of the primary operating cost elements in cold chain logistics services is fuel. And we also need to rationalize the required passage fees as we indulge in the transport of commodities. We refer here to the passage fees that are charged at the ports for ro-ro transport. We also refer here to the passage fees that are collected by local government units for the right to pass through the respective territories. The third component is demand enhancement. And we say that for purpose of demand enhancement, we need to undertake programs in market expansion. Number one, the development of alternative food sources. Why have we suggested this? This is precisely in response to the situations that we are confronted with today. First, we have the problem of the African swine flu that has besieged the hog industry in the Philippines. We are now forced to resort to imports to augment the supply of pork in the food supply chain of the country. But rather than concentrate on importing substitute food products, our suggestion is that there should be a stronger strategy to develop alternative food sources so that we do not become too dependent on import sources. Second, we also need to encourage cooperative and commercial farming versus individual farming. We have seen this happen all too often, that individual farming prevents the agribusiness sector from achieving economies of scale. And this is something that we need to undertake in order to create a better competitive position for the agriculture industry. Next, we also believe that processing or value adding is something that will contribute significantly to address the economic status or to improve the economic status of our agribusiness stakeholders. As we speak now, the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines is working very actively with the fisheries sector to undertake activities which will provide value-adding facilities in the aquaculture industry. Fourth, the penetration of new markets with competitive advantage. As we have suggested in the past, particularly in the vegetable sector, the domestic market for vegetables may not be able to support a strategy to concentrate on high-value agricultural crops. And therefore, there may be a need to study the possibility of participating at least in regional markets for Philippine agricultural products. And a testimony to this is the recent export of okra, Philippine okra to South Korea. If this can be done once, it can be replicated many times over. Last but not least, of course, is the possible participation of the cold chain industry in the national vaccine program. The fourth key result area in the cold chain industry roadmap is food safety education. We need to be able to deliver the message properly. We also need to emphasize the benefits of cold chain intervention. First among these is dispelling what we call the warm meat myth. We have to educate the Filipino consumer on the benefits of consuming foods that has been passed through the cold chain, because first, there is scientific information to support the contention that frozen foods do not lose any of their nutritional value, and they provide other benefits such as supply stability. As earlier mentioned in the presentation in May's presentation, one of the benefits of cold chain intervention is the stability of supply of food products during natural disasters. If I may reiterate, one of the benefits of cold chain intervention is nutritional value retention. And the most important economic benefit will be the reduction of food wastage. One of the other aspects of food safety education is the recognition by the consumer of the uniformity of standards. A classic example here is the categorization of slaughterhouses. Why is there a category A and a category AA and a category AAA slaughterhouse? If we go into the details of the categorization, we will discover that the only difference between AAA slaughterhouses and AA and single A slaughterhouses is simply the availability of cold chain support. So our contention is that we should not be employing double standards in the conduct of operations of the supply chain for food products, because what is good for international markets should be equally good for the Filipino consumer. Relatedly to this, we have also seen that there are standards that have been propagated in the food regulatory industry that says that certain standards are mandatory while others are voluntary. Again, we speak here about double standards. We should have a common standard to protect the Filipino as well as the international market. Third, why do we have a different standard that is imposed versus imported products versus locally produced items? I will not dwell into the details of this, but those of us who are stakeholders in the cold chain industry are well aware of the idiosyncrasies of the double standards that are imposed in the regulatory implementation of food safety standards. The last key result area, policies and regulations. We emphasize that one of the most important policies and regulations that need to support the cold chain industry initiative is the enforcement of the Republic Act 10611, or better known as the National Food Safety Law. As we mentioned in earlier the slides, the problem here lies in the inconsistent application of the provisions of RA 10611. And we would suggest strongly that the implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act 10611 be reviewed so that enforcement will be streamlined and enforced evenly throughout. Also, we see that the enforcement of the Ease of Doing Business Law, or RA 11032, will be very helpful for industry development because it makes it makes for the navigation, the easier navigation of the business community through the regulatory atmosphere that pervades our industry. Third, the pursuance of food security programs. We have seen the necessity as we go along. We have recognized the necessity to implement the food security programs that have been advocated by different quarters in the food industry, and we subscribe to the pursuance of these food security programs. And last but not least is that we are hopeful that the Philippine Congress will enact the passage of the Public Service Act amendments, which will make the business environment more attractive to foreign investments and may accelerate development of the cold chain industry in the country. As a closing statement, let me just say, there is so much that can be done. There is so much to do. As with any other national or personal aspiration, the first step is always to develop the resolve to do. Otherwise, all plans and programs are simply empty talk. The Cold Chain Association of the Philippines has declared its openness to work with other sectors, be they private or government, in conceptualizing, formulating, and executing programs and activities essential to our food security. We trust that the objectives laid out in the cold chain industry roadmap shall guide us in our noble endeavor. We are now ready to answer any questions on the subject that has been discussed. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dizon, for that answer. We will go to the opportunities presented by energy efficiency and new technologies will be topic discussed by our third speaker. To answer the question, what are the incentives and benefits for cold chain enterprises that will pursue energy efficiency? We will be playing a pre-recorded presentation by Director Patrick Aquino of the Energy Utilization and Management Bureau of the DOE. Follow-up questions will be answered by Assistant Director Art Habitan from the same bureau. So, May, can you please play the recording of the DOE?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss incentives and benefits for cold chain enterprises that will pursue energy efficiency. I am Patrick T. Aquino, Director of the Energy Utilization Management Bureau of the Department of Energy. We are always using energy for cooking, heating, and cooling, and it powers all sectors of our economy. Our choice of how we can use energy affects our way of life, from choosing lighting between CFL or LED to design buildings in allowing natural light. With the promulgation of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, or Republic Act number 11285, we put upfront the energy efficiency and conservation as the nation's way of life. However, subsequent interventions are needed to attain the objectives of the changing landscape of how we act, how we think, and how we use energy. It is clearly stated in the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act that fiscal incentives play a major role in promoting investments in energy efficiency. These incentives will accelerate the capital expenditures in investments, particularly high energy saving and high efficiency services. ASEAN countries, particularly Japan, Indonesia, and India, have already adopted fiscal incentives, and it is now the turn of the Philippines to incentivize energy efficiency projects. In the Philippines, while we are still in the early stages of implementing Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, we recognize that to accelerate needed investments, it should be incentivized. Under Department Circular Number DC 2021-05-0011, or the Guidelines for the Endorsement of Energy Efficiency Projects to the Board of Investment for Fiscal Incentives, the Department of Energy, together with the Board of Investment, devise an incentive program for energy efficiency projects. Cold chain projects can be considered as energy efficiency projects as long as it will realize energy savings, examples of which include the installation of equipment or system for new construction, facility, plant, or establishment, retrofit projects that involve the installation of equipment, devices, or systems, modifications or expansions of an existing plant, facility, or establishment that involves the installation of equipment, devices, or systems. Energy savings and project costs must meet the prescribed minimum project boundary. Pioneering energy efficiency projects for new construction, facility, plant, or establishments will be subject to Article 17 of EO 226 or the Omnibus Investment Code of 1987. Energy efficiency projects categorized as ESCO-initiated, TPPD project SPV, or self-financed. For the availment of fiscal incentives, the DOE shall endorse energy efficiency projects that pass the technical and economic evaluation criteria. Income tax holiday or ITH may be availed as a fiscal incentive for endorsed projects. The rate of the income tax holiday or ITH is dependent on two factors: how the project was undertaken, whether the project was self-financed, ESCO-initiated, or TPPB SPV, and how much annual energy savings in excess of 15% is realized at the project boundary. The higher the savings, the higher the ITH. For instance, energy efficiency projects of the energy service companies or ESCOs in 2020 amounted to 689 million pesos. Based on the kilowatt hour per year, total energy savings may amount to 209.8 million pesos on the next years and will continue to double in the succeeding years ahead. In line with the Sustainable Development Goal or SDG of ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy, these projects will induce consumers of energy to adopt measures to effect changes in energy consumption in a most efficient and cost-competitive manner. It will help reduce energy consumption through implementation of energy efficiency projects. The resulting decrease of power demand will delay the need for investments in the power system to meet demand requirements. Specifically, it will lead into reducing greenhouse gas emissions by increasing efficiency in the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity to achieve social and environmental goals. Lastly, it will help mitigate system emergencies by increasing system reliability by offering a set of alternatives for optimizing resources and providing flexible options for future business that results to reduce operating costs and increase cost competitiveness. The energy efficiency projects are not just projects of the Department of Energy. It is our project to help not just the environment, but also our future. Our intervention means that the next generation will continue to have a sufficient and reliable supply of energy. The objective is to have a measurable reduction of energy intensity and consumption per year. And we need you to support all the investments to energy efficiency. We aim to create an energy-efficient Philippines that cuts across economic sectors and imparts energy efficiency and conservation as a way of life of all Filipinos. Again, this is Patrick T. Aquino of the Department of Energy. Maraming salamat po.
And that's a pre-recorded presentation of Director Aquino. You may type your questions directly in the Q&A box to be answered later by Mr. Habitan. We will now go to the presentation of the DNR. In our pursuit to make cold chain climate-friendly and sustainable, proper management of substances such as refrigerants are important to protect the environment. To answer the questions, what action can be pursued by the industry to ensure proper management and disposal of refrigerants? Let us please welcome Engineer Edwin Romel Navaluna, the Chief of the Chemical Management Section of the Environmental Management Bureau of the DNR. Sir Edwin?
Yes. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I will discuss on action pursued by industry to ensure proper management and disposal of refrigerants. Proper management of this and disposal of chemicals in general and refrigerants in particular is an important aspect in health and safety. It also limits the emission of chemicals that adds to greenhouse gas, as well as ozone-depleting substances emissions. EMB-DNR implements RA 6969, or the Toxic Substances and Hazardous Waste and Nuclear Waste Control Act, which the national law that mandates regulations on chemical substance management and disposal of generated waste. The specific regulation that covers refrigerants is the Chemical Control Order on Ozone-Depleting Substances, in which the latest revision is in 2013-25. Under this regulation, and recently signed EMBMC 2021, entitled Registration of Service Providers of ozone-depleting substances using equipment, requires the regulation of service providers. It is in the servicing sector that refrigerants needs proper management, recycling, or disposal. Service providers are required to undertake measures to ensure that refrigerants are managed properly. They need to undertake effective measures, including the acquisition of necessary equipment, technology, training, and infrastructure for the purpose of effectively handling ozone-depleting substances and refrigerants, including the responsible use of refrigerants, minimizing their emissions, and effectively phasing out their use by replacing them with alternative substitutes, duly recognized and certified by the DNR through the EMB. They need to adhere to good practices in handling working with refrigerants set forth under the Code of Practice for Refrigeration and Air Conditioning, approved and adopted under the DNR administrative order. They also need to participate in a system to recover, reclaim, and reuse refrigerants that will be led by the DNR. Also, need for registration as waste generator, specifically for ozone-depleting substances waste, and classified as L403 under our regulation. They also need to register for treatment, storage, disposal of ODS under Category F. And finally, there's a need for treat and dispose ODS waste in accordance with DNR administrative order on the revised procedure and standards for the management of hazardous waste. So it is expected that those engaged in servicing of refrigerants must have standard tools and equipment on the recovery machine and recovery tank to prevent intentional release to atmosphere of refrigerants that remains in the compressor during servicing of refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. This means that they must have capacity to store the recovered refrigerants in a well-ventilated and proper storage facility, or may surrender to accredited TSD facility by the DNR AMB, since right now we don't have destruction facility in the Philippines. So finally, industry wide, there is a need for strengthened capacity for the proper collection and storage of refrigerants and their eventual destruction in approved destruction facility. The government is also looking at options for proper disposal of collected ozone depleting substances and alternatives. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Edwin, for that. We will entertain questions later after the presentation of two more agencies. Okay, there's already a question regarding standards. So to give us an overview of the standards development for climate-friendly cold chain, let us all welcome the Senior Trade and Industry Development Specialist of the Philippine Bureau of Standard, Mr. Abelino Molina Jr. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Malinaw
Okay,
po
sir.
ba ako, yung audio?
Malinaw na malinaw po.
Okay, thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I am Engineer Abelino Molina Jr. and I will be presenting about the BPS as well as the standards development activities related sa climate-friendly cold chain infrastructures. So before I proceed, I would like to thank the UNIDO for organizing this forum as well as all the participants attending today. So ma'am, next slide please. Okay, so to give you the standardization landscape in the Philippines, I will be discussing an overview about BPS and its standardization processes. I will also presenting some of the list or some of the related standards on cold chain, refrigeration systems, as well as energy management systems. And lastly, the opportunities and challenges we encounter in standards development. Ma'am, next slide, please. Okay, so for the BPS mandates, the BPS or the Bureau is a line agency of the Department of Trade under the Consumer Protection Group. So we work alongside with the Consumer Protection and Advocacy Bureau or CPAB and the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau or the FTEC. So our office was created on June 20, 1964 through the Republic Act 4109, or it is also known as the Standards Law. So at present, we are located in the DTI head office in Makati, and we are the recognized national standards body of the Philippines, and we are mandated to develop, promulgate, implement, and coordinate standardization activities in the Philippines. So our mandate was also reiterated in the RA 7394 or the Consumer Act, wherein the DTI, the Department of Health, and the Department of Agriculture are mandated to develop and provide safety and quality standards for consumer products. So for Department of Agriculture, their jurisdiction is on agricultural products, while for the Department of Health, they cover the food and health-related products and devices. While for the DTI, all products that is not covered by the DOH and the DA, the DTI will is mandated to develop and mandate or implement the corresponding standards. And lastly, we also collaborate with other agencies like the Department of Energy for petroleum products, energy efficiency, and conservation. And lastly, we also observe the country's obligation under the World Trade Organization Technical Barriers to Trade Agreement, which aims to ensure that the technical regulations, standards, conformity assessment procedures do not create unnecessary obstacles or barriers to trade. Next slide, please. Okay, so the BPS represents the country in the ISO and the IEC, or the International Organization for Standardization, and for electrotechnical products, that is the International Electrotechnical Commission. So they are the two international standards developing organizations recognized by the World Trade Organization. So aside from these two organizations, we also have established license agreements and collaboration agreements with other regional standards developing organizations, such as in US, ASTM, or the American Society for Testing and Materials, as well as the Underwriters Laboratories. And in Europe, the European Committee for Standardization. So with these license agreements and collaboration agreements, they allow us to use their standards in the development of our national standards. And they also encourage our local experts to participate in their standards development activities. Next slide, please. So the office has 4 main functions or services, which are distributed to 4 divisions. The first one is the Standards Development Division, which primarily tasks to facilitate the development of Philippine national standards. The next one is the Standards Mainstreaming Division, which is tasked to do the promotional activities of the BPS services, as well as facilitating the World Trade Organization inquiry point. Next one is we have also the Conformity Division, or Standards Conformity Division, wherein we implement 2 product certification schemes for both locally and imported products, which are covered by our mandatory certification. And lastly, we have the testing laboratory, which is located in Dasmariñas, Cavite. So we conduct third-party testing of products covered under our mandatory certification to verify the conformity of the products against a specified Philippine national standards. Next slide, please. So to set for a common understanding, I would like to discuss the definition of standards based on the ISO and IEC definitions, which is in line with the concept of standards in the WTO TBT agreement. So basically, standards is a document established by consensus, meaning it is generally accepted and it was developed in collaboration with relevant stakeholders, and it is approved by a recognized body. Here in the Philippines, we have the BPS and other standards developing organizations like the DOH, DA, as well as DOE, and other government agencies with mandates in standards development. And it is a document that sets the rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results. So in practice, it is a document that sets specific guidelines for the design, operation, manufacture, and use of nearly everything produced by mankind. So standards addresses or meet the needs of industry, businesses, and other interested parties. So almost all the stakeholders in the community. So next slide, please. So in the BPS, we have 2 methods in standards development. So the first one is the project approach, or what we call technical committee method, and the second one is the fast track method. So for the technical committee method, so we develop The development process undergo a technical committee deliberation, wherein a committee is composed of relevant stakeholders such as from the academe, industry, testing institutions, regulatory bodies, and other interested stakeholders. And while for the fast track method, it is usually done on international standards proposed for adoption as Philippine national standards. So this process do not undergo technical committee deliberations. We also do this when there's an urgent need of a standard. And both methods undergo 2-month circulations to relevant stakeholders to solicit their technical comments before being promulgated or published as Philippine national standards. So next slide, please. So answering the question on how can standards development address the need for climate-friendly cold chains. So basically, the aim of standard is to protect human health, safety, and the environment. So it includes property and animals as well. And it also ensures that different products work compatibly together. So it provides a level playing field for cold chain industry, as well as the manufacturers and suppliers of the equipment, since they will follow the same sets of rules, specifications, which are usually set as minimum requirements, which are acceptable to all stakeholders. So basically, standards are voluntary in nature, meaning the compliance is not mandatory unless it is used as a reference in a technical regulation. For example, our mandatory product certification, or in a two parties wherein, for example, for a procurement contracts. So basically, the technical regulations are usually issued by a regulatory agency, for example, the DTI or the DOH. So technical regulations consist of both the technical requirements, which is usually based on standards, and administrative requirements or provisions such as sampling, testing and inspection, evaluation, penalties and sanctions, monitoring and market surveillance, and other administrative provisions. So next slide, please. So listed on the subsequent slides are the list of national standards related to cold chain. So the first slide presents to you the series of ISO standards which were already adopted as Philippine national standards on energy management system. The next slide is on refrigerants, and as well as refrigerating systems, which were already adopted as PNS also. By the way, these standards, all the national standards, are available in our standards data center in Makati, with a price which is much lesser compared to its ISO equivalent. So the next slide would be on standards on explosive atmosphere, wherein it is related to the use of natural refrigerants. Next slide, please. So this slide is also for explosive atmospheres. Yes, next slide. Okay, for this one, for ISO standards, which is within the work program for this year, although it is not yet adopted as national standard. So this ISO standards refers to related to cold chain logistics. So hopefully within the year, we will be adopting these 3 standards related to cold chain logistics. So next slide, please. So lastly, for the opportunities or challenges in developing cold chain standards, we face this challenge in sustaining the participation of our stakeholders in most of our technical committees, as well as the availability of technical experts in participating TC deliberations. take note, the participation in technical committees, in BPS technical committees, are pro bono. There's no salary in it. And lastly is the lack of regulation on cold chain infrastructures. There's a need to have or to develop first the technical regulations before we could implement standards. Presently, we only have a certification scheme for household refrigerating appliances with storage capacity limit up to 567 liters, or equivalent to 20 cubic feet. And next slide, please. For the opportunities, opportunities in developing cold chain standards, we have the opportunity to adopt international standards related to cold chain industry, considering we are a member of the ISO and the IEC, which are recognized international standards developing organizations. So we are assured that our national standards are at par with international standards. We could also participate in their development of international standards, both for ISO and IEC. Presently, we are a participating member to one of their subcommittees, but on the aircon subcommittees. And through the standards development, we could collaborate with other concerned government agencies as well as private stakeholders. And that's it. For more information about BPS, please log on to our website, www.bps.dti.gov.ph. And thank you for listening, and we hope to answer all your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Molina. So we are calling the expert present today to give a pro bono service to the BPS for the standard development. And by the way, our project will collaborate with the BPS in standard development related to cold chain. So we will work together, sir. So thank you again, sir. Please don't leave yet, since you have some questions to be answered. Yes. There are already, I think, related questions to your agency. So anyway, the NMIS representative, particularly Dr. Agreda and Dr. Chavez, have sent a message that their internet connection, that's already here. Ma'am, Dr. Agreda, can you now present? Okay, okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am, the screen is yours po, ma'am.
Okay po, thank you. Hello, nag-screen share na po ako. Na-view po ba?
Opo, ma'am. Nakikita na po namin ng malinaw.
Yes po. So, good afternoon po. So, in behalf of NMIS, I am Ms. Marlene Bitong po from Accreditation Registration Division. And I'll be discussing po yung guidelines licensing of meat establishment with national and international distribution. Kaya niya pag-move. Sorry. For the outline of the presentation po, first po yung NMIS briefer, and then our legal basis for issuance of NMIS LPO. Then third po is the meat establishment structural requirements, documentary requirements. Fifth po is the procedures in licensing and issuance of PO. And for the last slide, normal licensing of meat establishments. So we at the National Meat Inspection Service, so we are the specialized regulatory service attached to the Department of Agriculture. We are the sole national controlling authority on all matters pertaining to meat safety, meat inspection, and meat hygiene as guided by laws and assurances. So kami po ay ang aming central office po ay located sa Visayas Avenue po sa Quezon City. And aside from the central office po, meron po kami mga regional technical operation centers located po all over the Philippines. So meron po kaming 7 divisions sa central office, and then 17 regions po. And also we have meat laboratories. Meron po kaming central laboratory dito po sa Quezon City. and then 5 satellite meat laboratories po for ano po, regions 1, 3, 4, 8, 11, and region 12. So as for the organizational structure po, we are under po the Meat Inspection Board, and we are headed by the Office of the Executive Director in the person of our OIC Director po, Dr. Jocelyn Salvador. Dito po yung aming mga divisions. We have 5 technical divisions and yung ating po mga sa admin and finance divisions po. And then the RTOCs po, or the Regional Technical Operations Center. So ito po yung ating sinasabi ng mga technical divisions. Ito po yung Accreditation Registration Division. Ito po yung division po namin, nagbibigay po ng license to operate sa mga meat establishments. Ang mga meat establishments po na ito ay sorry, gumalaw siya. So meron po kami mga slaughterhouses, PDP, meat cutting plant, cold storage warehouse. Included po dito yung pagbibigay po ng registration sa meat transport vehicles. Then we also have the Plant Operation Inspection Service Division. Sila po nagmamonitor ng compliance with regards to hygiene and sanitation program po ng mga meat establishments. Then we have Meat Import Inspection and Export Assistance Service. So dito po nagla-license din po tayo ng mga importer. And we have ano po, Foreign Meat Establishment Accreditation. So yung mga gusto pong mag-export po ng mga produkto dito sa Philippines. So i-inspect din po ng ating mga ano po, ng mga food safety auditors. Then we have Meat Standard Development and Consumer Protection Division. So it's sila po nag-formulate ng mga meat hygiene and safety guidelines and procedures for the production of meat. So yung mga capability buildings po ng ating mga meat inspection officers, including po yung mga LGUs or yung local government units po ng mga inspectors. And then we also have the laboratory services, which is capable po to conduct microbiological tests, yung biotechnology, PCS-based, and the veterinary drug residue monitoring, or yung ating pong VDR program monitoring. And then these are the relevant laws and assurance po. Basis po ng aming meat inspection, po. So this is the Food Safety Act of 2013. So we have the implementing rules and regulation, yung joint DA-DOH 15-007, series of 2015. And then the Meat Inspection Code of the Philippines, yung 9296, as amended by RA 10536. Yung pinaka-viable po ng aming inspection. Ito po yung tinatawag namin na Meat Inspection Code of the Philippines. And then we have the Department of Agriculture Administrative Circular Number 2, which is the mandatory licensing of meat establishments with national and international distribution. So this guided by a Memorandum Circular 08-2017-013, so series of 2017, which is the licensing of meat establishments po. Yung nabanggit ko po kayo na types of meat establishment, yung slaughterhouse, PDP, meat distribution center, and including po yung ating cold storage warehouses. And also we have DAO number 9, series of 2003-2003 po, which is the mandatory application of HACCP in all AAA meat establishment. Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay po. Sorry. And then the DA Administrative Order number 21, series of 2004, mandatory application of GMP, GOP, SSOP in all AA meat establishments. So ito po yung nabanggit ko kayo na the different types of meat establishments. And we have din a classification of meat establishments. So during ito evaluation, check po natin if the meat establishment will be classified as AA or AAA. So for AA po, in terms of facility and equipment, ito po yung mga semi-automated. And then, in terms of food safety program, meron po silang GMP or yung Good Manufacturing Practices Program, or yung GOP po natin, Good Operating Practices for ano po siya, cold storage warehouses. Then the distribution of product is domestic or national. So all over the Philippines po yung coverage ng AA na meat establishments. And is supervised by an LGU inspector or an NMIS meat inspection officers. So for AAA naman po, the facility is automated. So marami na po dito mga machines na gumagana. Yung po yung mas marami po sila compared dun sa AA na meat establishment. And with the food safety program, aside from the GMP or the Good Manufacturing Practices program, they are also certified to HACCP or yung Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. So kailangan po sila certified sa ano po natin, sa HACCP. And then the distribution of product, ito po ay national and international. So they can ano po siya, export po. Makapag-export po sila ng produkto sa ibang bansa. And then also supervised by the local government unit na mga meat inspection officers and NMIS meat inspection officers. For the meat establishment structural requirements, so we have ano po dito mga physical structure, equipment and facilities, and sanitary facilities, and ito po yung makikita po yan sa picture. So ganito po yung tinitingnan natin during the evaluation. So check po natin kung compliant sila sa structural ano po natin requirements. And then for the mandatory requirement, so we issued ano po Memorandum Circular 08-2017-013. So for poultry dressing plant, we have mandatory requirement po like po electrical stunner, digital weighing scales, generator set. So when we say mandatory requirement po, kailangan po nila ma-comply ito. Absence of any ano po mandatory requirement, hindi po sila mabibigyan ng LTO. Yan, ito pa po yung ibang mandatory facilities. So they have to, kailangan po nila magkaroon ng Wi-Fi or internet access, the CCTV cameras, and glass freezer kung kailangan po. Kasi kung sila yung mag-export, syempre kailangan po nilang export ay mga frozen products. So, kailangan po ng cold storage facility, and then chiller or freezer room for AA. So, since national yung kanilang distribution, so dapat po meron po silang available ng mga chiller rooms para po ma-maintain na yung fresh yung ating mga carcasses, yung mga meat po natin. And then yung mga inspection area or stations, so kailangan po properly identified and lighted. And another mandatory facility po ay ang ating NMIS office. So kailangan po provided naman po ang ating mga regulatory officer na nagpupunta po sa meat establishment. So for AAA naman po sa laboratory requirements, kailangan po lang magkaroon ng, if possible po, meron po sila dapat na internal or in-house laboratory capable to perform microbiological or parasitological and chemical tests. So kung wala naman po, so pwede naman po sila makipag-tie up or magkaroon ng contract of agreement with the public or private laboratory facility duly accredited by DOH and or DOST. So, kung meron din po mga company operated or owned laboratory facility, so pwede rin po yun. So for AA meat establishment, pwede po sila magkaroon din po ng agreement with private or public laboratory facility para po masuportahan po yung kanilang GMP and HACCP program. And for the waste management program, so for class AAA, kailangan po magkaroon ng in-house rendering facility and then condemnation pit po. So ito pong class AAA na sinasabi natin na kailangan magkaroon ng in-house rendering facility, nagkaroon po dito ng medyo nagkaroon po tayo ng dito, hindi po siya na fully implemented kasi medyo mahirap. Marami po tayo mga meat establishments na hindi kinaya magkaroon ng in-house rendering facility. So ang ginawa po natin, nagkaroon po tayo ng hinanap na lang po natin sa kanila yung waste management program para makita po doon sa program nila saan po yung kailangan po nilang mag-transport ng kanilang mga waste products, yung mga nakita po nilang mga condemned, mga na-classify po natin na mga not fit for human consumption. So doon po, listate na lang po nila yung sa waste management program, and then meron po silang contract of agreement with DET or accredited mga rendering facilities. Yun na lang po na-require po natin in the absence of in-house rendering facility. For the documentary requirements, so as usual po yung ating mga hinihingi po sa application form nila. So kailangan po merong floor plan showing yung traffic flow ng personnel and condemned materials. And then yung approved sangguniang resolution authorizing the proponent to operate slaughterhouse and PDP. So yung where applicable po, usually po itong sangguniang resolution ginagamit po ng mga LGU operated na mga meat establishment. And then updated copy of business permit indicating type of meat establishment. So kung cold storage warehouse siya, kailangan po na-indicate doon na ang scope po na operation niya is storage of frozen meat. Then BIR-10 po, updated copy of water analysis, including po yung portability certificate. And then ECC po, or Environmental Compliance Certificate, or Certificate of Non-Coverage issued by DNR, EMB. And then another po yung current ano po nila, DTA certificate, a list of equipment and weighted capacity, and updated picture of the plan showing the major flow of operation. And then updated and duly signed hygiene and sanitation program. Manual 4, AAA. So procedure naman po in licensing and issuance of LTO. So dumadaan po mga application forms po natin for mga meat establishments applying for LTO. Dumadaan po sila lahat sa RTOC. Ito po yung manual application po natin. Pero currently po, we have an online application system which we call NARIS, so yung NMIS Accreditation Registration Information System. So ito pong manual na to, hindi na po siya masyadong ginagamit. So ang usually po nagma-manual application yung mga distant regions po na medyo mahirap yung mga internet connections. So now po, we have NMIS Accreditation Registration Information System, which is the online application system po for meat establishments. So kung okay naman po application ng mga meat establishments, ang susunod na po doon ay magkakandak po ng evaluation. So we use the term evaluation for new meat establishment. And then for those who are in the renewal process po, ano po yung mga nire-renew po, halimbawa, ano na po sila, ang tawag po doon ay renewal audit po. So may mga food safety auditors po tayo na nagpupunta sa meat establishment to conduct yung GMP, GOP, and HACCP audit. So ito po yung mga example na pictures po during the inspection or during the joint evaluation and renewal audits. So for new meat establishments, kailangan po makakuha po sila ng 71% na rating. And for 70% and below, they have to to make a commitment po na makorek po yung mga nakitang mga deficiencies para po maituloy nila yung application sa NMIS. So same with the audit results po, kung pag-evaluation po kasi may rating na tinitingnan. So pag audit naman po, passed or failed lang siya dun sa mga food safety audits po. So ganun din po kapag meron po nakita mga non-conformances or yung mga deviations po sa meat establishment, nagkakandak lang din po na ang close-out audit. Ito po yung tinatawag na parang follow-up audit. So hindi naman po ibig sabihin na sinabing close-out ay isasara na po yung meat establishment. So yan lang po siya, i-undergo lang po audit siya ng audit para makita ko ano yung ginawang corrective actions during the sa mga findings po na nakita ng mga auditors. Then after po niya, pwede na po siya mabigyan ng LTO. Kung okay naman po yung kung nasubmit na po yung mga reports, yung corrective and preventive action plan nila, so we can prepare na po the license to operate certificate. And then we can endorse it to the executive director for approval at re-release na po siya sa record section. So that will be the end of the transaction po. So ito po kayo na nabanggit ko yung sa joint evaluation for new med establishment. Ito lang po yung mga criterias. So yung sinabi pa na kailangan po pag AAA kasi kailangan po 81% na po siya. So i-rate po namin yung physical structure, equipment and other facilities, yung sanitary facilities and control, and the quality safety and quality assurance program. Yung pong mga GMT nila or HACCP. So for ano po dito, kasi yung sinasabi natin GMP, so during renewal, so meron po tayong tinatawag ng mga itong mga degree po ng ating mga non-conformances, yung sinasabing minor, major, serious, and critical. So kailangan po sa mga med establishment, dapat po zero po yung serious and critical findings para po magkaroon sila ng full certification at ma-renew po yung kanilang LTO. So for new med establishment po, ang binibigay po natin na initial LTO is valid for 6 months. Kailangan po within the 6 month po provide na po sila ng mga monitoring records para pag balik po ng mga food safety auditor, ang tawag naman po doon ay GMP certification. So yun po yung renewal naman po nila kasi tapos na po yung initial nilang certificate for 6 months. So ito po yung sinasabi ko kayo na meron po tayong new normal in licensing of med establishment. So yung online application and submission of documents for NMIS LTO. Ito po yun, yung NARIS. NMIS Accreditation Registration Information System. So ito po yung platform namin para po makapag-apply po ang mga med establishment ng kanilang mga new med establishment and renewal po. So itong nababanggit po na issuance of supplemental interim audit measure for new normal. So nagkakandak po kasi kami ngayon ng virtual audit. So before the pandemic, meron tayong tinatawag na mga on-site audits po kasing ginagawa, on-site evaluation and on-site audit. Pero ngayon po, normal dahil situation po natin ngayon sa COVID. So nagkaroon po kami ng supplemental interim guidelines. So ito po yung pag-audit po remotely. So meron po lang kami mga representatives kasi di po ba nabanggit ko kanina, meron tayong mga regional technical operation centers and all the meat establishments po ay supervised by meat inspection officers ng NMIS. Kaya po yun po yung counterpart po natin doon na tumutulong sa atin during the remote or the virtual audit. So yun lang po for the licensing of meat establishments. So thank you very much po and you can contact us po dito sa naka-flash po sa screen. So sa aming official website www.nmis.gov.ph.
Maraming salamat, ma'am, sa very informative discussion regarding the accreditation of cold storages. So, because lampas na po tayo sa ating hininging oras sa mga panelists, okay lang po ba na mag-ask pa tayo ng quick questions sa ating panelists? Kasi may mga questions po tayo sa ating both chat and Q&A box. So anyway, nakikita ko po, nandiyan po kayo. Sa quick question po kay Attorney Samaniego po. Ma'am, will the roadmap be updated periodically? And then the next question is where they can find the latest version of the roadmap po.
The roadmap, we can send an executive summary for those who wants to have a copy. You could just we'll just link with May to give to May the executive summary, and then we'll just forward it to those that requested. What's the second question, Engineer Hilda?
Yun nga po, kung ina-update daw po yun regularly and then kung saan po makikita yung latest version. So papadala niyo po kay May yung latest version. Tama po ba, ma'am?
The executive summary, yes.
The
That was
executive
just-
summary.
Yeah, that was just launched December 2020. And then for the updates, it will already be dependent on the TWGs because we're now moving on the programs, activities, and projects per technical working group. So whatever output of that, maybe in some ways there will be some information to be provided. We'll look whether we could place it in our website link po, in our website BOI. And in fact, if you could check on the BOI website, you could see there when we launch it, before launching, we secured comments from the public. So you could really see the PowerPoint presentation, what's in there.
Okay, so thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for that. So May will send to the participants through their email the executive summary of the BOI cold chain roadmap of the Philippines. Thank you, ma'am. So anyway, so moving on to the next question. I think this is for the DOE. I am acknowledging Director Aquino. I think he's already present to answer questions. So number one question po, sir, is does the energy efficiency guidelines include cold storage and food processing plants?
At the moment, the guidance that we're providing is on the square size. There's no specific mandate for that. But what we are indicating is that with respect to another issuance, Memorandum Circular 2020-05-0011, as an energy-intensive sector or designated establishment, the requirement is for compliance with a certified energy manager or certified energy conservation officer. I'd also like to point out that it was mentioned in terms of the requirements that both EE technologies and the deployment of renewable energy solutions can be counted for the compliance requirements. I did see a question earlier with respect to the linkage of tapping renewable energy for facilities. We are confirming, insofar as the requirements of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act is concerned, yes, the use of renewable energy will be counted for the compliance requirements to the EEC Act mandates. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, itodo ko na po yung sunod na question nyo para bago po ako mag-move on sa ibang speaker. Is there a unit in EUMB who can capacitate cold chain establishment on what requirements to prepare to avail the incentives on energy efficiency projects?
Yes, ma'am. That will be the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Program Management and Technology Promotion Division, or EPMPD. I think my presentation, the PDF version, will contain their email. You can also visit our website. We will be more than happy to reach out to you to assist you on that, including some concerns and questions on right sizing for your renewable energy requirements if you want to go into net metering, for example.
Thank you, sir, for that question. For that answer. So anyway, there's another question from Engineer Cesar Luis Lim. I think this is for BPS. Why not use the ANSI ASRAE standard for commercial freezer? Engineer Molina po.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, we don't have a license and collaboration agreement with ANSI ASRAE. Because in adopting international or other national standards, we need to have a license or collaboration agreement between BPS and the publisher of the standards. And considering our obligation in the WTO TBT agreement, we prioritize development standards using international standards like the ISO and the IEC. But in the absence of available ISO and IEC standards, we could also study other regional or national standards like UL, ASTM, EN. And probably if possible, if we could, in the future, we have a license agreement with ASRAE, we could also study their standards.
Okay then, sir. Marami pong salamat. So anyway, the next question I think is for the DNR. Sir Edwin, nandito ka pa po ba? Why not until now the Kigali Agreement is not ratified?
Okay, for the Kigali agreement, it took some time before we get concurrence of various government agencies, yung mga secretary. But so far, we already have submitted all the required documents to the Department of Foreign Affairs mid-August. So we are pursuing hopefully soon ma-ratify na yung Kigali Agreement.
Okay, sir. Salamat po. And then there's one last question for Governor Marjorie. Is cold chain industry roadmap also address challenges in off-grid areas in the Philippines, like capacity building in utilization of RE in remote areas across the Philippines?
Sorry, those will the issue on the infrastructure such as what was stated will be taken up in the TWG on cold chain logistics. It's already identified as one of the gaps, one of the barriers, and how to address it will be undertaken in the TWG on cold chain logistics.
Okay, then it is being addressed, the renewable energy. Okay,
Thank you.
it will be. Okay, then.
Yeah, it
For
will be.
Mr. For Mr. Dizon, sir, how can the NCC be more strengthened po?
Will you please repeat the question? Thank you, Gilda.
Okay, how can the National Cold Chain Commission be more strengthened?
That's a very valid question. And I'd like to think that the national cold chain strategy has been identified and defined very well in the cold chain industry roadmap. But it goes without saying that, as I mentioned in my earlier presentation, the cold chain industry roadmap requires a long list of things to do. We are just at the outset of the development of the roadmap, and therefore it goes without saying that marami pa kaming kailangang talakayin at marami pa kaming tulong na kakailanganin sa iba't ibang stakeholders dito sa industriya na ito, both private and government. At umaasa nga kami that with the meetings as was described by Governor March earlier today, the technical working group workshops that are being conducted as we speak will lay out the plans and programs that are needed for the cold chain industry roadmap to be realized at the earliest possible time.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, again, inaano po namin ng interest na yung project po ay gusto po mag-join ng committee at kami po ay susulat kay Governor Marjorie regarding that, ma'am.
We will already look forward to having you on the team.
Yeah. Of course, we'll look forward to that letter.
Okay po, salamat po. And so we have so many questions for NMIS, but siguro dahil because of time, isa na lang po ang itatanong, ang sasagutin natin ngayon at yung iba po ay sasagutin na lang natin through email na sasagutin ng NMIS. Ito po ay, may tanong po dito ay, galing po ito kay isang UNIDA project din also. Do you check, monitor the type of refrigerants at the freezer, chiller rooms, cold storage warehouse used for cooling? Yung representative po ng NMIS?
Yes po. So this is Lynn po ulit. So as of this moment po, hindi po namin siya na nako-consider yung type of cooling or refrigerants. Kasi since ang titingnan po namin is if capable po ba yung freezer or yung cold storage warehouse na ma-meet po yung required na temperature, yun po kasi yung kasama po sa minamonitor po namin. Not the cooling or the refrigerants po. Pero siguro we can consider din po kasi we are also checking on the yung sa mga in case na pagkaroon po ng mga leak, yung mga ganun po. So kailangan po yung mga ginagamit po nila instant po siya safe po for syempre sa mga personnel and sa product.
Okay. Salamat ma'am. Marami po talaga sa inyong question. Siguro po ipapadala na lang po namin sa email niyo yung question at sasagutin po natin because it's almost 4:30. Okay, to wrap up po ang ating activities ngayon, ito po yung recap na ating discussion. We heard from Anthony Ramos sa Maniago agenda of the National Cold Chain Committee consisting of government agencies and industry association. This committee will be integral in the attainment of the industry goals. Presently, the Board of Investment has the secretariat function of the committee, and as of the moment, they are developing action plans to measure the cold chain industry roadmap progress. Mr. Dizon also enumerated how the roadmap may be strengthened through the agenda on investments, infrastructure, and market expansion. He also highlighted the importance of food safety education. In terms of energy efficiency, you heard from the video of Director Patrick Aquino that there are incentives provided by the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Law, including income tax holiday, which will be based on the assessment on how the energy will be conserved by the energy efficient project. We also heard from Engineer Navaluna of EME regulatory requirements for ODS, as well as from the BPS, the standards for refrigerants and opportunities for promoting climate-friendly cold chain standards. Nothing to importance of participation of the development of international standards and collaboration with other concerned government agency and private stakeholders. Lastly, we heard from NMIS the type of requirements for accreditation of cold chain establishment. With that, marami pong salamat sa ating mga participants at sa ating mga panelists na naghintay po hanggang matapos itong ating activity. Again, good afternoon and have a good day. Keep safe everyone. Thank you po. Bye po.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye po.
Bye.
See you soon.